All right, good evening. We'll get things started here. This is the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, February 9th, 2017. We'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Jeff, would you take roll, please?
Sure. Commissioner Murphy? Here. Commissioner Mitchell? Here. Commissioner Newsom is here. Commissioner Grissom?
Here.
Commissioner Kalani? Here. Commissioner Fox?
Here.
And Commissioner Voigt is absent tonight.
All right, thank you very much. Next up, we have item 4, approval of the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Support?
We have a motion from Commissioner Mitchell, a second from Commissioner Newsom. Are there any changes? I have one.
Yeah.
We need to move item 8A to under item 7. This is a public hearing this evening for the rezoning application number 361. Any further changes? All those in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up, item 5, approval of our January 12th meeting minutes.
So moved. Support?
A motion from Commissioner Newsom, second from Commissioner Murphy. Any changes? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up is call to the public. If you are here for the now item 7 agenda item, there will be an opportunity during the public hearing for you to come forward and make any statements that you would like to in regards to that specific item. So if there's anything else besides the rezoning application number 361 that you'd like to talk about or make statements on, now would be the time to come forward. I thought so. All right. We'll close the call to the public and we'll go to item 7. And this is a rezoning application number 361 for the Hartland Glen Development, LLC. And to give you an idea how a public hearing works here, for those of you that are here first time, in a moment we'll open the public hearing and then we'll turn the floor over to our township planner who will introduce the project to everyone. And then we'll invite the applicant to come up to the table and add any comments they would like to make. The applicant then will go to back to the seat, and we'll invite you to come up one at a time, give us your name and address, and make your statements. There won't be any interaction back and forth at that time. We'll be taking notes. And then after you are done asking your questions or making your statements, we'll invite the applicant back up. And then between the Planning Commission, the applicant, the township planner will have a discussion and go through the review letter that our staff has prepared in regards to this application. So what I'd like to do is open the public hearing at 7:04 p.m. for the applicant, Hartland Glen Development, LLC. Tax IDs number 4708-26-100-019, 001, and 012. The applicant has requested to rezone portions of the 3 tax ID number parcels for approximately 73 acres of their 386 acres from CA Conservation Agricultural to HDR High Density Residential. And just for the record, all our public notice requirements for this public hearing have been met. And so I think with that, what I would like to do is turn the floor over to our Planning Director, Troy Langer.
Thanks. Just a note under the comments, we do have some sign-up sheets. We try to reflect the names of the people that spoke in our minutes, and we would like to make sure we accurately represent that. So we have those available at the podium for you to print your names when you speak so we can accurately reflect that in the minutes for the meeting. The request is to rezone approximately 73 acres from CA to HDR. And what I thought I'd do is start off by just showing generally where this property is located with this aerial view map. This is M59 at the top of the screen here. Pleasant Valley would be over on this side here. Cundy Road would also be somewhat at the top. And so this is essentially the property. I can only click on one property at a time. What I've done is I've clicked on the biggest property. In addition, there are two properties up in here that are not necessarily highlighted on this map. If I were to click on them, it would just show those properties by themselves. So these are each almost an acre, and then this is 384 acres. So combined, that's where we get to about the 386 acres. These two properties up here are primarily single-family residential in their use, and then 384 acres, as you can see, is primarily a golf course. Their clubhouse facilities in this location. They have their maintenance garage, if I can call it that, up in this location here, and then this is the golf course. And the area that we're looking at for the rezoning is this, what I'll call the northern portion of this 73 acres on the north side of this property. So what I've got now I'll show is a zoning map. That's a future land use. Oh, here it is. So this is a zoning map that shows how the property is currently zoned, and this is the property that's under consideration with this request in this location. And this light green coloring is the CA conservation agricultural category, and you can kind of see what's around this area for zoning. What the applicant's proposing to do, I've got a concept plan that I can show that would somewhat reflect what the applicant's proposing to do if they were to get the property rezoned. So just to make sure we're familiar with where we're at, this is M59 here, and then Cundy, and then this is the 73 acres. This gives an exact boundary of that southern limits of the 73 acres. And then this is a general concept plan of what the applicant would propose to do on this 73-acre parcel. The rezoning itself requires a public hearing by the Planning Commission. It requires Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the Township Board, and then the Township Board has the ultimate decision-making authority on this. There are criteria that the Planning Commission shall consider as part of its review process. Those have all been outlined in the staff report as part of that analysis for hearing a rezoning. And what I'll do is just leave it open for any questions or comments. I have the zoning map somewhat available if we need to reference it. I'll have the future land use plan here available to reference, and we'll get into more details as we go through the analysis. So with that, I'll leave it open for any questions or comments.
All right, and I think what we'll probably do is ask the applicant if you'd like to come forward, maybe introduce yourself to everyone, and anything you would like to add to the proposal.
Good afternoon. My name is Sam Yaldo. The address is 31,000 Northwestern Highway, Farmington Hills, Michigan. With me is my partner, Dave Nona, and our friend, Dan Callan, and he's a consultant to us. The only thing I would like to add, first I have to commend the planning department for the thorough and comprehensive report that they have presented to all to understand our situation. There's only one minor clarification I want to make, and that is this particular piece of property, the Hartland Glen Golf Course, originally came with 144 taps only. However, we had we had committed to 720 taps for other properties that we had around the golf course that we owned, but we lost. And over a very long battle, we ended up getting additional taps from the properties that we lost, imposed upon us, and added to our REUs for this parcel. So we are like in a bind. We have to use those taps. So, and that's why I wanted to make it clear on the record that this parcel had only 144, now it has 602 taps, and we have to find a way of using it for residential purposes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Now, if you'd want to just go back to sitting in the audience, what we're going to do is we're going to open the floor up now for anybody here that would like to make statements or answer or ask questions. As our planning director stated, if you could, when you come up, if you could print your name, we'll make sure we get that recorded correctly in our meeting minutes. And as I said before also, we won't be conversing back and forth. You'll notice us taking notes and all that. And your questions, we will do our best to get answered for you, but it'll move along more efficiently if you can give us the information that you'd like to share, and then we'll move to the next person. So with that, if there's anybody in the audience that would like to come forward, make any statements, please feel free to do so. You're fine. Somebody's got to start.
My name is Shannon Weiner. I live on Lone Tree Road, right behind Hartland Glen. I also sent a letter to planning regarding my concerns. My property looks directly at Hartland Glen. We're on Lone Tree Road, which is an undefined road. It's maintained by us. There's 3 of us that reside on that road. And when my husband built the house in 1978, he liked it for the way that it was. We were remote. We're private people. The neighbors have been there equally as long as I have, because he's since passed away, my husband. And my concern is not so much with the 73 acres rezoning. My concern is what happens to the rest of the land behind it. Looking at a subdivision is going to, I can't imagine anybody's going to want to buy my house if they're looking at a subdivision. It's going to take away from everything that this house is, which is a completely beautiful 5-acre property. I'm also concerned with what happens when that back acreage starts to get developed. Lone Tree Road's going to come into play because it's easy access, but nobody maintains this except for us. And I have many concerns as far as taxes with schools. You add that many houses and 2.3 kids, we're going to have more schools being needed. I'm also concerned with the traffic on Pleasant Valley because it's a quick pass-through to I-96. I'm also concerned with that many new builds on the market being starter homes. Somebody's going to buy the starter home, stay in it 3 to 5 years, then want to move up, but now phase 2's going. They're not going to be able to sell that home, so they're going to rent. So now I'm possibly going to be in very close proximity to 1,000 people. And that's concerning for safety because I do live alone. Overall, Hartland Glen's been a good neighbor, and I understand the bind they're in. I've done my research to see that they have tried to get their tax reduced. And I really don't think we can fight this. I really think high-density residential is ugly. I think it needs to be something less than that. I realize that things change, progress goes on, but high-density residential is really going to hurt me personally, financially, and I really don't think that's the look Hartland wants. I hope there's just so many concerns that I have. The displacement of the wildlife, for goodness sakes, that's a large acreage for them to be displaced. I have coyotes in my yard. They're going to move into the neighboring subdivisions. They're there. And if they get run out, they're going to go somewhere else. I just don't know how to express the dismay I would have of looking out at a subdivision. Knew this was going to come someday, and I wish them well with their endeavors, but I think high-density residential is just not what this property needs.
Okay, thank you. Because I don't want to forget, and we will get on to the next person. We did receive 2 letters, and Shannon, thank you for reminding me that I needed to enter both your letter, of which was also signed by James Alec, William Kuhn, Sandra Kuhn, and dated February 5th. And then we also have a letter dated February 1st that we received from Sherry Dalton. I just want to make sure we enter both of those into the record. Now, anybody else would like to come forward? That would be great.
Well, my name is Gloria Poi. I live in 12032 Cundy Road. And so I received a letter of this proposal, zoning proposal. And conservation agriculture, I would say, is the lowest tax rate for land. And I'm surprised that it's not something else, being that Hartland Glen is a business golf course. But I appreciate having it there. It's a beautiful piece of land, and I don't think there's another golf course that offer, two courses for people to play. However, I'm very familiar with the land because, I often walk my dog after hours or in the winter when the season's closed. And I think the conservation agriculture was granted for a reason because this area is basically a watershed. As you can see in the other map, there's a creek system and lake system that drains. And when you walk the land, a lot of the area, even in the driest summertime, the land is wet. So perhaps before it became a golf course, when they turned it into a golf course, they might have filled some area, but it never really dried out. And so my property, I own probably at least 100 feet of wetland between Cundy Road and the golf course. And that section of wetland is low. So my concern is with a subdivision that big, your groundwater, your snow melt, and salt would drain into that low area of the wetland. So I was wondering, before this zoning get changed, perhaps we need DEQ to do a wetland study. And because I believe it is a watershed area, and wetland is involved, and there's ponds and lakes within the golf course that I see homes are going to be built surrounding it, I am deeply concerned about the effect on the environment. And also, I dropped into the township to ask them about the classification of high-density residential. However, the township, when it showed me the map, on the other map, with the red and white bar is considered high density, with this yellow dotted area supposed to be medium density. So perhaps the classification of this letter is even not correct in classifying the zoning change to classify it as high density. I guess in my mind, high density is like a trailer home park, and proposing 178 lots in this area is a lot of homes. Of course, like the other homeowner, I'm concerned about safety because I own a lot of woods between my house and the golf course. And and wildlife. I did see coyote and deer and owls and frogs and stuff. But my other concern is when the township granted zoning for Hartland Meadow, there's so much more homes, and the property tax that we collect from areas like that did not support the school system. So we had a brand new school that opened, and right away I know this trailer was being pulled in to accommodate the overflow student. So when you add that many homes in such an area, can our school support it? And then I'm also concerned about the water table. I talked to the township people that perhaps they would need sewer system hookup, but also with that many homes drawing on, let's say, well, would it change the water quality of my well, because my well is not that deep, and I think it was less than 100 feet deep, and I get water. But that's my other concern, is that whether it's going to dry up my well. I guess perhaps that's all I have to say.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Sherry Dalton, and I own the property at 12195 Cundy Road, which is the small lake just north of Hartland, of this proposed development. Like everyone that spoke already, I've got all those concerns, but also my lake. I'm very concerned about the effects that this might have on the lake. Years ago, when they widened M59 and they had a sinkhole there, and they dumped all kinds of sand to fill that sinkhole, it drastically changed my lake. So I'm wondering, what effect is this kind of a development going to have on the lake? Also, the traffic is a major concern for safety. The deteriorating roads, Cundy Road is already in terrible shape, and that amount of traffic would just be unbelievable for our area. Also, the home values. If it's a high-density residential development, very concerned about what that effect would have on our values. I think the master plan has proposed for medium density. I think that's a little bit more realistic. I understand their predicament with, their cost involved with the REUs that they've had to pay for. But I think HDR is just way out of line. When I talked with Troy, you mentioned potentially with a high-density development, a community well would probably be required. So I would like to propose that impact studies be done for studies on the effect that it would have on the lake, on the roads, on the wildlife, on the safety, on the traffic, and yes, on our wells. And that's about all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Craig Whipple. I'm at 1768 Bobby Street. We back up to the backside of what they're proposing here. I guess my concern has a lot to do with the traffic. We've already had 3 subdivisions built off into the backside of Maxfield. They extended Renfield and Odette, I think, is the two roads. I might get them confused, but made a big loop back there, added houses there. They added houses further back down and are building further back down on Maxfield. One of the big things that's going on right now with the township is the trash haul thing, and they're saying the trucks are causing the problems to the roads. I can tell you it's the gravel trains that have been running down the roads. And after they're done building them, they aren't fixing the roads. So I guess I'm concerned with this. Cundy Road it's a war zone driving down Cundy Road. I have a motorcycle in particular. It's dangerous to drive down that road. It's that bad. The watershed issue, that's a big issue. I agree with you. Everywhere you walk out there, it's the ground's spongy when you get back in there. We just recently got issued a new tax to support a lake level on a lake that we don't have lake access rights to. The only thing I can figure is it's because of the watershed going to keep that lake level because of all the water table from the other lakes moving over. So again, that's a big concern. You start paving everything, where's the water going to go? And it's not something that apparently everybody out here has been taxed for that. It's only people with lake access rights back there apparently. So this is going to affect that because this water's going to run off into these lakes. Like I said, we're already being taxed for something we can't use. So Maxfield Boulevard, which is the dirt road Maxfield that crosses the paved Maxfield, that ends right back up to that golf course. Are they going to start running trucks down there to get to their property? That's a concern. So we're going to add exit. We've already added a lot of houses in this township, not just in my area, but all around the entire township. But yet we have very limited police force. And now we're going to bring in even more people, and still we've got no law enforcement. This township's been very lucky with the crime rate that it's had. For years, I worked at the Food Town store that used to be there on 59, and always wondered why. I worked midnights, and I always wondered why nobody ever robbed one of the stores when they were that close to the freeway and they could just easily get away. And not long after I left, they did get robbed. And then we've had a couple of the banks robbed. But I guess what I'm saying is we've been very lucky that that's all that's ever happened in this township for the most part. There's been a little bit here, a little bit there, some houses broken in, at least in my neighborhood. But what's going to happen when we start bringing in more influx and more people? The odds of that, I would imagine, would have to go up. But my primary concern is, one, the effect on the property, the effect on the roads, and the effect of the additional traffic. We already have a huge amount of extra traffic in that area now. So, and it was a quiet place. When I moved in out there, it was nice. It was quiet. It's not getting to be that way anymore. So, unfortunately, I may be moving. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Anyone else? Hello.
I'm Linda Harwood, and I bought a home on Maxfield, and my house faces Little Silver Lake and then the golf course. When I purchased the home, I was told that nothing would be developed there, else I wouldn't have bought it. But I agree with what everyone said. My concerns are that the development, once this is zoned, they could put in trailers. I live by myself. The danger, the traffic, the noise from the surrounding lake will increase. How it will affect our property values and our taxes. Also, the high-density development, when it was put into effect, it is now 40% increase of what the original plans were. And how will this affect, the zoning affect our, everything? Could they put in condos, manufactured homes, the tiny houses? How is the water, my sewer? I'm concerned about all these things. So I am highly against it.
Okay. Thank you. All right, anyone else? Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Donnie. I live on Maxwell Road. I'll make this quick. I want to back up what this previous gentleman just said about the construction traffic and the concern. I think it's spot on with war zone as a description. I also own a motorcycle, and I have low ride height sports cars that I'm really tired of ruining and destroying my equipment trying to get back to my house. So I guess I just want to back him up with saying that this is not really a suggestion as much as a request, a direct request that current state, we need to handle Cundy, because coming off of 59 onto Cundy is a complete train wreck. And then if you take Cundy eastbound to get, which I cut through to go to work, because I go to work in one direction and I come in from the other direction, it's an absolute nightmare. And it's a direct request that you guys consider that with this. And then Maxfield's the same way. Maxfield, this will be my 5th year living. I bought my house about 5 years ago, and the last 2 years, I'd say it's just completely been destroyed. Slowly, surely, monthly by month, it's gone from a decent road to really just destroyed, and the gravel train trucks. I think that's exactly what it is. So I guess I want to back it up to saying we really need to consider construction traffic having some kind of clause, or when you guys think about how this is going to get planned out, you do consider how the people that do destroy the roads, how they are going to help us out and then pay for repairing it before or when the project's done, I guess. So thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, anyone else?
Hi, I'm Doug Carson. I live on 12226 Cundy, so I'm basically on the north side where it cuts down diagonally. Don't have a lot of new info to add. Just want to back up some of the other comments that were made as far as there being a lot of wetlands on that property. I actually have a wetland that's in the back of my property there, and at certain times of the year, water does run in off the golf course into that wetland, and the water level goes up. So I'm a little concerned with some of those lots. I know this is just a plan, but those lots that are off the back of my property there, those are going to have a lot of water in them certain times of year, and them trying to develop that, I'm concerned if they try to add some fill in there and correct that issue for them, that water is going to end up in my property, in my basement. So, but beyond that, I guess I would state I'm not really seeing much here that's going to improve things for Hartland Township. I don't think high density really fits in with a lot of the other plans and subdivisions that have gone in. I don't see much benefit. I do see a lot of risks as far as Cundy Road and Maxfield. Traffic's already pretty heavy. The road is in pretty rough shape as it is. It's narrow and it's just rough in general. So, and I guess beyond that, with the high density, I know we've talked about need to have a community well and some sort of sewer from that point, but I'm not sure where that ends up. I mean, I don't know where the sewer runs as far as Hartland, but I don't think there's any sewer out there now, so where that infrastructure would end up. But I am a little concerned for my own well and that water table. So.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening.
All right, good evening. Hello.
My name is Bill Raines. I live at 12477 Highland Road. I moved out here about 5 years ago, and the specific attraction to me was the ruralness, the land, the trees, the wildlife. I live on 4 acres that would look directly at this across the street. My home has been here since the 1890s. And again, my attraction to this area was not high density residential. So I just want to go on record to say that I'm adamantly opposed to a zoning change for this purpose. I'm specifically opposed to it because of the small lots and the large number of homes that would be involved. I am not opposed to residential development here, but with larger lots. As I understand it, the current zoning would allow residential development, but I think it's a 2-acre minimum, which seems to be more in line with what Hartland kind of stands for and looks at. So that being said, I'm most interested in preserving the rural, natural landscape of the Hartland area while allowing development that recognizes that, and I just don't think HDR is. So, and I reiterate everything else that my neighbors said. I support all their comments, and I just don't think it's the right move for Hartland.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Hey there. Hello.
You knew I was coming. My name is Sean Angott. I live at 2075 Wilson Lane. I have to start out and tell everybody, like I do every time, this is the comprehensive plan, the future land use plan. It's awesome. Read it. There's a lot of great stuff in here, and I like, with the exception of the SPA, as you know, most of what's in here, and it's got a great balance of the density, the residential, the commercial. It's spread out really well. But it seems like every time we turn around, we come in here, we're picking little pieces of it away, and we're a little more signage here, a little fewer trees here, a little more density there, and we're looking at them one at a time. And there's folks here that are worried about this little parcel, 180 potential acres here, and traffic probably don't even understand that there's the Mayberry Homes proposal, which is 5 or 6 times the size directly east of it, plus the 40-acre parcel that's for sale in between them that's also part of the SPA. There's a lot of potential density here. And we're talking about allowing this based on an adjoining parcel designation because the parcel next door is high density or whatever it may be. Well, where does that end? We could just go right on down the list and we could turn them all in, like the comment earlier. The whole golf course could be high-density residential. And we're not looking at the thing as a whole. I never see anybody say, well, if we're going to turn this into high density, we better go across the street and take that multi-use and knock that down to low density. It never works backwards. My other concern with this is letting the zoning change through on a hypothetical plan. If I'm doing my math right, and you'll have to help me out here, I think the current future land use says medium density. Is that correct, or is it low density? You don't have to answer, but
we don't answer it right now.
I understand.
But
it's medium. Okay. If I'm reading the plan correctly, if they go to high-density residential, despite that only saying 179 lots, high-density residential allows lots as small as 4,000 square feet, which my math tells me is potentially 800 lots on that chunk of acreage. That a future person, if you go HDR, isn't that a possibility that somebody could go as high as 800? That's an insane density. And then again, it dominoes right down through the other 301 acres and into the parcel next door. If I read medium urban density residential, 2 to 3 lots per acre, that gives them 140 to 200, which satisfies the 180 they're asking for anyway. So why do we have to go a whole step further and go to high density if medium density, which is where we're at, gets us there? So those are my questions. Those are my comments. The comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Is that it? Last call. Okay, I think what we'll do now is close the public hearing then at 7:40 p.m. And we'll ask the applicant if you'd come on back up. And the commission is familiar with, and I believe the applicant is familiar with, the staff letter. You had mentioned it in your previous presentation, dated February 2nd. We'll kind of take a a walk through that, and that'll bring up points that we need to talk about. So everyone is familiar with this. Planning commissioners, feel free to ask the questions. Troy, the applicant. It will be also the opportunity for us to cover any of the questions that were asked in the public. So if we take a look at that letter, the first couple pages are a little bit more of the background that we've already covered, and I think our actual start for our review probably starts on packet page number 14, which is found in the lower right corner. About 2/3 of the way down, zoning ordinance rezoning criteria. And we see the first one is section 7.4.3.A, consistency with the adopted comprehensive plan. Troy, can you help us out with that?
Yeah. I think it might help to just explain the difference between a zoning map and a future land use map. What I have up here right now is the future land use plan that's adopted by the township. At this point, there's no changes proposed for this document. Future land use plan is supposed to be, in general planning, this is the goal of what the township is looking for 20 years down the road. It doesn't mean that if the township shows higher density residential or commercial or office in an area, that land should be automatically rezoned to that category on the zoning map today. It may be that the goal of the township is, in the future, this is an area where the township could see commercial if certain infrastructure improvements were there or certain other improvements were made. But it may be that it's not ready to be rezoned immediately today. So the future land use plan is a tool that the township uses to give a vision of what the township's looking for. In addition to that, the future land use plan, it gives a basis for the zoning. It makes the zoning not arbitrary. It makes the fact that the township has zoned property in certain classifications part of some plan that the township has looked at. And what I want to do is kind of just spend a little time and compare, where can I find the zoning map? So this is the zoning map right here. And there's, maybe sometimes they don't make this simple. They have to add lots of categories with lots of words of medium density, high density, and then they got the comp plan, and they don't always match up. So I think some of the comments I heard, there's a little bit of mixing of the future land use categories with the zoning categories, and they're two different documents. The current zoning right here is CA. That category is an agricultural category as well as a single-family category. If we look at it just from the single-family standpoint, it requires a minimum lot size of 2 acres, 200 feet of lot width. The proposed zoning of HDR, high-density residential, is a single-family category that only allows, well, not only, but primarily is for single-family residential. Its minimum lot size is 8,400 square foot. Those are all set out in the zoning ordinance for the minimum lot size requirements. I believe it's 70-foot wide lot width requirements. Maybe it's 80 foot. I'm just going from memory off the top of my head. So, but it's 8,400 square foot lot size requirement. That is generally designed, when you get that small, you're generally designed to be serviced with some sort of municipal sanitary sewer system. And generally, again, some sort of municipal water system or community water system. So the first criteria that we're looking at is consistency with the comprehensive plan. So is the requested rezoning to HDR consistent with the plan? This is the current land use, future land use designation on this property. That shows it in a density of half an acre to an acre. This would not be consistent with the HDR category. The HDR category would be consistent with the land here to the west. The land to the east is in the special planning designation area. That's a very difficult one to pinpoint down what its density is. The comprehensive development plan does identify density, but then it builds in bonuses that can be granted, so it can even exceed the density of what's being proposed. So this is the area that we're looking at, this north half of this kind of yellow with dots on it here. And the proposed HDR category would be more dense than what the future land use plan currently depicts. I probably went into a little bit longer explanation than what I needed to, but that's just some background information for you. And
I think that it's important to understand that the difference between the comprehensive plan is it's not a technically creates any rights. What creates rights is the zoning map. Once a zoning is given, it creates rights in the person that owns the property. So everybody, anyone who owns property can come in for a rezoning, which is this applicant is allowed to come in and ask for a rezoning. He could ask for commercial, he could ask for high-density residential, or he could keep it as CA. The idea behind a rezoning is that we anticipate that in the township, and I've been here long enough to know the idea here is one of the folks have spoken before, is we try and have a balance in the township. You can't completely zone out certain types of properties. You can't zone out, for example, you can't prohibit mobile home parks. You can't prohibit certain areas that may want to have what's the phrase in the zoning for those high-risk commercial explicit.
We call them let's go with adult entertainment.
Adult entertainment. You can't completely say we're not going to permit adult entertainment. You have to have areas in your township. People have a constitutional right to use their develop their property, and they're also entitled. Every one of you who own property have entitled a certain amount of investment-backed expectation. And so when it comes to properties, that's what the purpose of the zoning is people who have investment-backed expectations, I should say, not opportunities, investment-backed expectations. And in this case, that's why people come in for a zoning. They come in requesting density, or they as part of their zoning with types of density, or if it's a commercial property. This particular property, just so everyone understands, and why the density that's being requested is because there's sewer. Sewer came down M59, and it makes that property, because it's on M59, susceptible to high-density types of developments. That doesn't mean we can't prohibit them, or modify it, or what have you, but the idea is we have to look at all the different attributes, because that's what the law requires us to do. We can't just simply say, no, we're not going to permit types of different. So that gets us back to what the land use map, this map, is all about, because this is sort of every 5 or so years we look at this, don't we? We just did, most recently, and those are the designations, and that doesn't mean that where something is low density is not going to end up becoming high density, because we also look at what the applicants will come in for, and we look at the surrounding properties. So if you've looked at the packet that Troy has put together, he's identified those kinds of things for this board to consider and ultimately the township board.
Yeah, and I would agree, and I think the other thing that I would just add to it as background is you want your most intense use or your most dense populations closest to your infrastructure that can handle that. In this township, that would be M59 and Old US 23. So you're going to find, as you look at the map, and if you take the opportunity this evening or in the future to go look at the maps, and see what all those different colors are, and if you look at those colors as they represent, well, how intense is that use, or how many people are there, or how dense is that, you'll find that most of the colors that create the most intense use or the density fall within your main infrastructure, which in this town, as I said, are those two main thoroughfares. So your rural character that is referred to over time, over and over, as long as I've been here, as you move out from that main infrastructure, from those main roads, you will find that your density will go down. You won't find your heavy commercial sitting way off of your main infrastructure. So it's within the applicant's rights, and I think as we get through a couple of these other points here, we'll find out just exactly why are you asking for this specific density, and there are more questions to be asked. But
I had one other thing.
We do want to point that out.
Plan. That's just a conceptual plan. That's not being permitted today. That's just what he's suggesting how he might develop it. But at the end of the day, if he were to get the type of zoning or some other type of zoning, he would have to still go through that whole site plan process.
Right. So the proposal that you see before you isn't necessarily the proposal that will come forward. What you have to look at is what is permitted in the HDR zoning district, because if the property is zoned HDR, he would be entitled to the permitted uses within that area, or any special uses that would be allowed would require additional review process. And I think one of the things to clarify here real quickly is the HDR, while the word high density means many things to people, you need to look at what the words are. It is single family. There are no mobile homes permitted in HDR, and there are no apartments. So those are out of the equation. So fears of that type of development coming in an HDR, we have categories that permit that. They are not HDR. So he would not be permitted to bring any of those particular uses forward. So we want to make sure we're clear on that. Yep.
I have a question.
Yes.
Talking about the HDR too, because I know, from today's zoning, we have certain terms, and then when we move to the future land use, we have different terms. So today's HDR, as you said, Troy, is like 8,400 square feet.
Yep.
The future land use plan has an HDR category.
Yeah.
And in that one, it's 4,000 square feet, significantly double, So my question is, just let's say he is granted HDR today. Does it ever switch over to that future HDR?
No, because we're changing the zoning, so it'll be at the zoning at that point. It most similarly emulates, the other thing is there are two categories, and you have to read the plan closely. We have a medium urban density residential, and we have a medium suburban residential. Those were created long before I got here, because I never would have made them that close. Yeah. So when people say medium, you got to say, well, which one do you mean? Because they're two different mediums. So we want to be really careful with some of those terms, and I have to look back all the time as to which of those mean. But in regards to the density, I think Troy put together something to help us here, so we'll let him talk.
I put together a little list because this is just the single-family residential categories, the different categories that currently exist in the comprehensive development plan. And the top one I have here is the medium urban density residential category, which would be consistent with what the applicant is proposing.
Right.
The property that we're talking about is currently in this medium suburban density residential category, and then this is the approximate lot sizes and it's a half acre, and so what I've done is equated that to a square footage there, to an acre, and then that's your square footage figure there. And then the other categories are the low suburban, estate residential, rural residential, and then this is the special planning area, and then here are the lot size requirements that are outlined in the comprehensive development plan. There is an asterisk here because there can be a bonus granted at the discretion of the township. That's difficult to determine what that bonus would be, so I can't incorporate any kind of a bonus. So that's just the number that's given in the comprehensive development plan. Yeah. So this gives you the different categories and what their general lot size requirements or density would be.
And the other thing to keep in mind is when it says 8,000 square feet as your lot size, that's the lot size. You can't take the total property and divide it and say that now becomes this many lots, because you need to take out wetlands, you need to take out roads, and all of those things. The minimum lot size, the actual lot that the house goes on, will be 8,000 square feet. So you cannot take the acreage and divide it out and say it is X. It doesn't work that way.
So then down here I've got, for comparison, are the single-family categories and then their minimum lot size requirements. And at the top is the HDR, high-density residential. And again, these are just single-family categories. And that is Hartland Township's smallest lot size for a single-family residential zoning category. And then these are the lot size requirements as you go down. Ultimately here is CA at 2 acres, so that's the approximate. The RUR actually requires a 3-acre one. So this is a comparison so you can see. And again, there's a lot of these names that if you read them and then you read the future land use plan and those designations, it can get very confusing between the two. So I created this little chart. Maybe I should have handed it out. I did it more for my purpose, but maybe it would have been beneficial to include in the packet. But I've got this if by chance something.
Well, the important thing to remember for everybody in the room and everybody watching at home, the request is to rezone the property. So if the request is granted, they will follow the rules of the zoning district. At that point, you don't look at the future land use map. That goes away. Now we're into zoning, and we will look at what the requirements of that zoning district are. So if you go home and you compare the two, what you need to look at is what does HDR allow, and or any of the other categories. So we've identified the fact there is a discrepancy in the request to the future land use map. Your letters pointing out the neighboring property to the west is of what he is requesting. The special planning area to the east, somewhat similar, but in some respect hard to determine. We would have, as we move to the south, obviously, we're becoming less dense or larger parcels. And then, of course, across the street, I believe the dark blue is all office.
This is all office here. This would be the red and white striping is that special land use, special planning area. So that can be a combination of office, commercial, even almost multifamily as well as single family. And then over here is, this is a higher density single family future land use designation here to the west. So this is surrounded on 3 sides by either office or potentially higher density. Then as you get to the south, you can see it's what it is, and then even going further south, this is a less dense when you go across Lone Tree Road. And I know we had some people that lived down there that had commented tonight. So their future land use is even less dense down here.
Any other comments?
Yeah, before we move on from the map, I think it's a good discussion to have, this high-level discussion about the general planning areas. Can you compare the proposed zoning with what we currently have in the township today, so that we can understand and do a visual comparison with what they're planning and what we already have either on the books or already developed?
Yep. That's a good point. The only land that is zoned in this HDR category is this subdivision over here. I think it's called Mill Point. And I did have some residents come in, and I met with them one-on-one, and I pointed that out, encouraged them to go look at that and get an idea of what they thought of it. Not that that is indicative of how every HDR category, zoning category would be developed, but that gives an indication of the lot size at least. I think the concept plan that the developer or applicant has a mix of 10,000 square foot homes and 8,400 square foot homes. So
lot size.
That's their. But again, those concept plans, from my opinion, I'd almost prefer he not even show a concept plan, because it tends to get people focusing on that plan. And you have to remember that if this rezoning is approved, the developer can say, well, that plan fell through. I'm not even going to do that, and can come in with a proposal. And if that plan is consistent with the new zoning, that's what you might be looking at. So,
how does this compare with the latest one that Steve Granow is developing there between Autumn Woods and San Marino?
That's over here. That's in a PD category, and the PDs are different, are a little difficult to compare. One of the advantages a developer has with the planned development is he can sometimes get additional density because he's proposing a development that has some extra public benefit. So there's a little bit of a trade-off that the township would be willing to do for a particular development to grant higher density because the public benefit of that development was deemed to be worthy of it. So I don't remember the exact acreage of that particular development. I think it's in the 25 units is what he's got. I couldn't tell you the acreage off the top of my head.
Something like 9 acres or something like that?
Yeah, I think you're right.
25 acres.
That sounds very familiar. And I'm thinking it's 26 units. Is it 26?
I thought it was 25.
Okay.
So 10 to 12,000 square feet lots, maybe?
Well, he did it as condominium developments.
But just for comparison's sake, I mean.
Well, he didn't do any sort of lots. He just did a detached condo unit that's on a pad. It would be hard. They're separated 20 feet in between them. I would say you're probably going to be closer 10 or less thousand square foot for that.
So very comparable to 8,400 square feet.
Yeah,
nearly comparable.
I would say. Mm-hmm.
And those houses are going to start at 300,000?
325.
325?
I think it's really important to remember that, as Troy mentioned, the comparison to the mill point is only the lot size.
Yes.
Right.
There is no architecture proposed. There is nothing here but a lot size. We're trying to get a comparison for ourselves and for the public. So when we do that, that's how we're using the mill point development. Absolutely, Sam.
What I would compare my first phase of the project is somewhat identical to Heritage Meadows that is just down the street that we did back 15, 20 years ago, probably later.
So you're talking right up here, up at 50 this way. Yeah, 59 and Clark Road.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're putting on our first phase. Somewhat identical.
What size lots are those?
They're 80-foot lots. Yeah, they're 80-foot lots.
So are your lots, are we talking about a 70-foot lot or an 80-foot lot right now?
The first phase of the project is going to be 80-foot. Once we see success in the project, we're going down to 70 feet so we can absorb the we have 602 taps that were allocated to this project, and there's no way we can absorb them. We have 85 acres of regulated wetlands. That's a fact. We have 10 to 12 acres of unregulated wetlands. Okay. Our main entrance, if you look at the concept plan, our main entrance is straight from Hartland Road into M59. So Cundy Road ends at Hartland Road. We're not going to have, we'll barely have any traffic on Cundy Road. Okay. Now, looking at the zoning that we are requesting, it's basically the same zoning that is being proposed in the comprehensive plan for Heritage Meadows, our project down the street, and for all the properties on Maxfield Road, where everybody's objecting. That's what the comprehensive plan shows. They are high-density residential. That's what the concept plan that I just looked at shows. Now, the first lady that lives on Lone Tree Road, she can rest assured it's not going to be in my lifetime that section of the property will be developed. We will always maintain at the minimum 18-hole golf course. We need that. Just by doing that, we're not getting any close to her. And the rest of the objections, I just don't understand them. We're going straight from Hartland Road straight into M59. What we're proposing in zoning is not heavy density as to what we have inherited based on the number of units that we have to dispose of on this property. I'm definitely confident that no matter what we rezone this property to, we're going to have leftover sewer taps to contend with. We're not going to have the land to do it because our plan is to leave 18 holes golf course. We have 85 acres that is wetland, regulated wetland, and about 10, maybe 12 acres of unregulated wetland. And we've never, even unregulated wetlands, we rarely use them for building. We will use them for detention or retention to get rid of the stormwater. And that's a concern that a gentleman brought up, there will be not a drop of water that leaves our property to anybody else's property. That's a no-no when it comes to engineering. So I can answer any concern that they may have.
And we understand. And I want to make sure everybody understands this request is for 73 acres. Certainly everybody's going to say, well, what are you doing with the rest of the land? You've already made it very clear you have 601 REUs, sewer taps that you need to get rid of. So certainly that's in the back of everyone's mind. But this request is for 73 acres and the density that would go with that 73 acres if an HDR rezoning is requested. If any future development of the land outside of the 73 acres is desired, or utilization of any more of his sewer taps is desired, they would end up back here again. So one does not necessarily lead to the other. Certainly, I think a question's coming to you about these 600 REUs, that these sewer taps that you have in a couple minutes. But the request is for 73 acres, not 380 some.
So I had a question. With the property zoned CA, how many sewer taps can you get on that property?
If we deduct 85 acres of wetland and we deduct about 140 acres of golf course, that's 225 from 380. That's about 155. I can build 155 homes, 1 acre lots over the entire golf course.
So when you purchased the property, though, it was zoned CA?
Yes. Yes, it was. But the plan was to develop it into a golf course community. And even when we were through litigation, the previous planner for the township insisted on the record that we can build 1,000 residential units on this property. And it's on the record.
Okay.
We are not asking for anything that's not reasonable. That's unreasonable.
Okay, any other questions on this topic? If not, I think we'll move to the next one. We've probably merged a few of these in here, so if we get short on them, it's because we tend to cover a lot at once, particularly in a rezoning request. So on packet page 15, the first item up, section 743B, compatibility with the site's physical, geological, hydrological, and other environmental features.
So we've talked a little bit about some of the water features that exist on the property. The applicant has mentioned something in the neighborhood of an 85-acre wetland. I think that's primarily in this location here. So a good chunk of that is actually going to be outside of the rezoning. The rezoning boundary is going to be just kind of to the north up and through here. So on the rezoning site, you can see some water features just from the aerial map. If you look at the concept plan that the applicant's provided, he identifies a few potential wetland sites. To my knowledge, none of that has been determined and accepted as being regulated or unregulated by the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, nor is that a requirement of a rezoning to do so. Would the rezoning be compatible with the existing site? Well, it's a golf course. The rezoning category is to single-family residential. It's a high-density single-family residential category. His goal is to essentially eliminate the northern 9 holes of his golf course here, and that would take him from I believe a 36-hole golf course on the site to a 27-hole golf course on the remainder part of the site. And so I guess the Planning Commission will have to decide, is a single-family residential zoning category consistent and compatible with the existing land makeup, which is largely a golf course. So
when is it appropriate to ask him to identify those wetlands as regulated or not? Is that at the site plan
That's
stage?
at the time of development. You know, the entire township is in every square inch of the township falls into one zoning category or another. That doesn't mean that we go out and require all those property owners to spend money to hire environmental engineers to assess what existing environmental conditions are on their property. It's usually at the time that they want to develop it that we say, well, let's take a look, see what exactly is there, and identify exactly how we're going to impact it.
Okay.
Well, I think it's very important to have these studies done for a lot of reasons that we've discussed already, but if you're saying then we can have a little bit of insurance, if you will, that, okay, if we go ahead and grant the rezoning and they do an environmental impact study, it might not necessarily mean that they can develop it the way they want to. We'll have that capability to kind of scope it a bit differently once they come with a site plan development.
I mean, it might help if you think, I mean, just hypothetically, if it were rezoned tonight and tomorrow morning it was effective a new zoning category, what impact does that have on the property tomorrow? None. Nothing's happened. The property is zoned something, and by switching it to a different zoning category has no impact on the actual property. It's not until there's a development proposal that would come back here in front of you, and then we would examine.
Well, he's got to be fairly confident, I would think, that it's not half-regulated wetland, because your concept plan is blown up.
Well, that's where I was leading, is that maybe it might be better, instead of dividing this property up into a 73-acre portion and then another 300 or 280-acre portion, maybe we look at the whole property instead and talk about cluster developments and where we have opportunities. If your end goal is to develop X amount of properties on this, so that for various reasons, instead of looking at individual portions of the property, maybe we look at the whole property. Maybe that's more appropriate because it does affect, it's a large property in the township, and it does affect a lot of the watersheds in the area. So if we portion it up into 25% pieces, 5 years at a time, I think we'll do better looking at it comprehensively.
we have in our hand a completely flagged and surveyed wetland map done by King and McGregor and Mikulich and Associates at the time Pulte was going to develop the property. We have that in our hand. We made sure that we're not encroaching upon any of the wetlands that are regulated in this phase. However, to answer your question, it's impossible for us to determine what we need to do with the rest of the property because only time will tell. Only time will tell. And we think just for this portion, just for these 9 holes, it's probably a 7 to 10-year project before we can develop, get approvals, develop, and build and sell these homes. So I don't know what we will be doing 10 years from now, and I don't know what section that we're going to be touching. I know for a fact that the south section, the water table is high, and it will be very expensive to develop. The south section may be the most compatible to remain a golf course. We may have to add to it if we take out some other holes to be able to get close to the number of taps that we've been allocated. So it's very, very long term. We just cannot predict what we want to do with the rest of the property now. This is a very nicely isolated 9 holes. There's a road that leads you to the rest of the golf course. Very, very, very smooth travel lane, and we literally isolated the developable property at this point from the rest of it.
But I can guarantee it's not the only phase. So we need to take a look at long term. We need to take a look at 20 plus years out. And if you have a little bit more of that information, I think it would help us making our decision today.
What we have in our possession is a plan that Pulte developed, and it encompassed another 70 acres that we lost, and they had about 1,000 units. And there were major changes in the golf course itself. We don't have that ability financially to change anything in the golf course at this point, or maybe even in the future, because it's very expensive to remove a hole and replace it with a different hole. It's a couple $100,000. It's not economically viable. We can bring the Pulte plan, but you'll have to eliminate big chunks of land off of it because it's gone.
More specifically referring to the wetlands inventory.
We have that.
And environmental impact study and those sorts
we can
of
bring
things.
that to Mr. Langer very soon. We have that.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting.
No, we have that.
Probably interested in seeing that. I don't know if that is too far out in the future on the commitment of a development plan. At least take a look at the wetlands portion of it. And then I think if you or whoever, if it develops that slowly, decides to develop any more here, and I'm still around, it might be interesting to see a more comprehensive plan for the balance of the site, because then you're going to start getting into destroying your 27-hole golf course, and how are you going to pull that off? So, but I think taking a look at the wetlands is not a bad thing for the whole site, but maybe the site plan just for this particular, or the rezoning just for this piece would satisfy my needs.
We can have that plan to the planning department as early as Monday.
Does that work for you?
With all the wetlands marked up, numbered, and sizes.
Okay.
And whether they're regulated or not.
All right.
It's all in there.
Next section, I know this one spurs a question for probably many of us here. Section 7.4.3.C, reasonable return on investment with the current classification of the CA. You state you have the 602 REUs on the property.
Yes.
How'd you get those? What made you buy 602 REUs?
Well, we had a major plan to develop the golf course into what Pulte calls active adult community. Okay, and they came up with a preliminary plan at the time. We had them under contract, so we engaged with the township to buy 25% of the SAD4. And we committed to that at the time, and those 720 taps, which were 25%, were subdivided into 5 parcels. Each one had 144 taps. Well, Pulte walked away, the economy tanked, homes were selling for 30 cents on the dollar, and we ended up losing 4 of the 5 parcels. We ended up with the 383 acres golf course with the 2 homes that are on septic, and 144 taps. The lots that we lost were bought by other people, and the other people had a shock of their life when they saw what was imposed upon them in sewer assessment with the tax bill. So eventually the lots ended up in the township's hand, and they're still owned by the township. They're off of Lone Tree, and township came back and started took the majority of those taps based on what they calculate we can develop on the golf course. That is this is a very important point. Based on what the township thought we can develop on the golf course, they took the majority of the balance of the 720 and put them in the tax bill for Hartland Glen. So from the 720, we ended up with 602. The other 118, if you go through the tax bill for those parcels that are on the south, you're going to find 118 taps allocated to those properties. And the balance of the 720 we inherited. It was the township's judgment that we can build 602 units on this golf course. Okay. $4 million in sewer assessment.
Any questions?
Yes, Dave.
Okay.
I'm totally confused. I don't know if Troy could answer any of these questions, but why would the township calculate how many REUs the entire parcel could handle?
Well, probably in Troy's defense, he wasn't here. I don't know. Maybe you were probably involved in some of those discussions.
The township had a bond, and they had to make payments on the bond. Okay, somebody had to commit to those taps and make payments on their tax bill so that the township can pay for the bond money that they borrowed, or maybe the county. So the obvious person to go to is the person that has the big parcel and was committed to the 720 taps to begin with. And it was, they won in court.
So when you, just trying to connect the dots here, and we don't really need to go too deep into this piece because it does raise questions for me. But, so you're saying that you signed up for 250 taps?
No, 720.
Oh, you signed up for 720.
720 on 5 parcels.
Okay.
This particular parcel was 144, and 4 other parcels were 144 each, for a total of 720.
How big were the other 4 parcels, if you don't mind me asking?
One of them was like 60 acres, the other one was 10 acres. The township attorney...
Well, how did you think you were going to... and maybe we don't want to go too far here right at this moment in time, because we're really not into the... This really isn't something we get into, but how you... If you bought 170 or 720 taps, why did you split them up in 5 parcels? You'd never put 144 on 10 acres.
Believe me, the township attorney split those up in the agreement.
Okay, probably deeper than we need to go.
Knows.
The property was reassessed in accordance with the law, Act 185.
Okay.
It was properly reassessed across the entire parcel.
Okay.
And that was part of the litigation with respect to the foreclosure by the township on the delinquent tax assessments. So.
Okay.
There were errors, and those errors were addressed through the special assessment process.
Okay. Okay.
So I guess bottom line is that he has 602 REUs that he pays a substantial amount for, that's assessed on the property, and he cannot recoup that with the CA category.
Okay.
So when you get back to the investment-backed expectations.
Yeah, well, that's one of the criteria.
Well, that's the one we're on, and that's the why it raised the question.
Correct.
Because that seemed to be some driving factor here. I just wanted to get that out.
He will need, if not the HDR, very close to that to recoup.
Well, let me make this comment not in support or against this proposal or anything. But I stated a half an hour ago, when we look at the map and the intensity of the uses, I didn't know this was going to go there. But I'm going to draw what I said a half an hour ago right into this. If, in fact, there's a utilization of 600 sewer taps on this property, my expectation, if I'm still sitting here, is that I would see a denser project up along 59, and as you move further back, it would be less dense. So I don't know what less dense is. I don't know what dense is. But I'm going to just make it would just make sense that it would flow less dense as we move to like a Lone Tree. That doesn't mean 2-acre parcels. It doesn't mean 1 acre, half acre. I'm just saying, in my mind, when I look at a zoning map, that's how I see a zoning map work.
We would have loved to do higher density at this location because it's closer to M59. And we've approached many apartment developers, but the township is saturated with apartment. So we had no luck. We had no luck.
Okay. Well, that would just be my comment on use and intensity. And I think, is there any other questions on return on investment at this point?
I just want to support Jeff's comments, too. I feel in order to make a decision here, we kind of have to look at the whole site holistically. There's a whole blurb in our whole ordinance about cluster development, working with the land, preserving the natural corridor, having open spaces so wildlife can go through, et cetera. So I really feel in order to move forward, we have to see the whole site holistically to really understand how to achieve your hardship of the 602, but also looking at our area as a whole, to really look at it the best use. Totally, it makes sense to put more development towards where the infrastructure is, but we have to look at it holistically for many reasons.
I agree. I agree. The problem I'm struggling with internally is this is a request for 73 acres, not 383.
Right.
And any property owner could draw a line somewhere and request a rezoning for a piece of their property, and that's the only part that we're really looking at here. I agree with looking at the wetlands in its totality. I don't agree with looking at a whole plan, because he hasn't asked us to rezone 310 acres. He asked us to rezone 73.
Right, but his hardship is that it's 602 for the whole place. So to split off 10 acres, 20 acres, whatever, that's a hard deal for me to reason with.
I agree, Sue. And that's my difficulty.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're automatically, subconsciously reviewing the entire parcel because it doesn't add up. So you know where the future is headed.
I totally agree.
But I agree with you, Larry, that we're only to concentrate on the requested 73 acres, but in fact, we're looking at this whole parcel.
Well, is there a way then that only the 73 acres could be rezoned and the balance of the property be left CA?
That's what he's asking. That's all he's asking. That's why I keep saying the application is 73. I agree with what you're saying. I don't know how to evaluate 310 acres that isn't on the table. Because he doesn't. There is no plan. I don't know how to ask for a plan that there is no plan. Yeah, but you can give it to Troy. If it has 1,000 on it, I can tell you, I don't know why I want to see it.
No, the wetland map.
Oh, the wetland,
The wetland
okay.
map.
I thought it was the Pulte
Maybe I
plan.
can just open it for a second to give you.
Or you could put it under the projector if you wanted.
Possible.
Yep, if you lay it on that table,
Then everyone could see it.
I will try to have a camera. Yeah. Just bear with me here.
You may have to move the microphone
Move the
over.
microphone there.
Yeah, I think you need to be about the center of the table, and if you look straight up, you'll see that camera pointed down at you.
Nope, that's not the right one.
Look at that. Now can you zoom? Now he has to control it.
Yeah. Let me come up there.
He'll help you. You'll be good. He can zoom that in.
Well, I mean, we can see from the aerial view what the wetlands kind of look like and all that. I guess my point is to have it more professionally evaluated, and that's not something I think we're prepared to do tonight here.
No, it's.
We try not to get even close to the wetland because we know what it takes.
Yeah, I think the point we're all trying to make here is that this isn't the first phase. I mean, this is only the first phase. So in our minds, we need to kind of understand what's going to happen with the rest of the property and try and help you out that way. So, and right now, like Larry said, we're only looking at a small portion of it, and I don't think it's not good enough for me to make a conscious decision on this rezoning at this point. There's too little information for me to act on.
Okay. You guys want to move on to the next one at the bottom of packet page 15, section 743D, compatibility of all potential uses allowed in the proposed HR district with surrounding uses and the zoning. Troy?
Yeah, so I'm pulling up the zoning ordinance for HDR. Let me try to zoom in here a little bit. This comes straight from the zoning ordinance, and a copy of this was included in your packets. It's available in our zoning ordinance on our website. And it basically it outlines what the intent of the HDR category is, and it talks about it's designed for single-family detached dwellings within stable neighborhoods, and also designed to be served with public water and sewer services. And then it identifies these are the uses that are permitted in this category. And the principal permitted uses are listed right here. And these are single-family homes, public-private parks, essential public services, state-licensed residential facilities. These would be things like a child care center with 6 or less children, or even an adult foster care, again, with 6 or less guests there. And then over here are the special land uses. These are uses that, if proposed in that district, have to come here before the Planning Commission. There's a public hearing. There would be notice sent out. And then the Planning Commission would have a public hearing, much like we're having tonight, for any of these uses. This particular criteria that we're looking at for rezoning is questioning, are these uses listed here, all of them, compatible with what surrounds the area? And with that, I'll look at a zoning map, if I can remember. Here we are. You would think I would be quicker at this at some point, but so
pretty good.
This is a zoning map, and this is the area we're looking at, the north 73 acres of this. So To the west, this is a residential category. It is not HDR, but it's a less dense category, but the uses are going to be very similar. To the north, there's some of it would be CA, some up in here would be CA, which actually allows more uses. It allows basically everything in the HDR, and then it even allows more uses, such as some agricultural uses. And then to the east, it's in the CA category. Certainly this area right here is part of a current planned development proposal, and that could change as well. So for the most part, staff feels that the proposed HDR zoning category and the uses that are permitted are consistent with what surrounds it.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay, let's move to packet page 16, about two-thirds of the way down, section 743E, capacity of the infrastructure and other public services and street system. Troy, help us out here.
So, generally when you're talking about public services, you're generally talking public water, public sewer, sanitary sewer, as well as storm water sewer, and then streets. As far as the streets go, this property that we're looking at, the 73 acres, has some frontage on Cundy Road. That's a public street there. There's also a private road that kind of goes back into the golf course property that serves as an access to the clubhouse. The applicant, as part of his concept plan, is proposing to keep and use that private road. So having access onto a roadway is deemed to be sufficient for having service from road standpoint. We've already talked on the public sanitary sewer, the REUs. That one there, again, we haven't done any kind of analysis, but it appears he's got REUs on this property, 602 of them. So he would have access to connecting to public sanitary sewer, so it looks like he would have that one. The real tricky one is the water. There is no public water here, so we don't have a development proposal in front of us. We don't have a real plan as to what he's going to do with public water or community well. We did talk with the county health department on individual wells. And with individual wells, it gets a little tricky. They need access to those wells. And I think I've touched on that in the staff report. So certainly he has access to roads. He'd have access to public sewer, and then the water. There's potential he could have a community well, and that would satisfy that one, that category as well. But he hasn't provided any documentation to that particular element there.
But at this point, he's not required to?
Well, not unless the Planning Commission decides that in order to satisfy that criteria, you'd need something.
How far out does the water line go on that?
It's back.
It's back further, so it only goes up to...
Probably the red. No, is that as far as it goes? Oh, yeah, you're right.
This is, so the Mug and Bob's gas station.
Yeah.
So it's quite a distance away. It would be fairly expensive to extend.
What is your thought on water?
Our plan is to have individual wells, and we will comply with all the criteria that
I noticed in the letter. Okay, I noticed in here, I don't know, Troy, this may have come out in your discussions with the county, that the county requires an access of at least 12 foot in width to access the well, but yet your side yard setbacks are only 10 feet, so you can't put the wells in the backyard.
if the well is on the backyard.
Okay.
We will calculate.
Yeah. Okay, any questions or comments on that? Let's move on. Section 743F, compatibility of the street system to accommodate expected traffic generated by uses allowed in the requested zoning district. Troy?
So I'll probably almost go to that concept plan. This is a difficult one to examine from that standpoint because there's not a traffic impact study that was done as part of this rezoning. It's not a requirement for rezoning that he supplies that. There is access to Cundy Road, and it's very near the intersection with M59. I don't know if this development or any development were to come in here from a traffic engineering standpoint, what percent of vehicles are going to go in this direction on Cundy Road versus coming out. I presume the vast majority are going to be coming out to this intersection here with M59. This project, since it's a concept plan, we have not had discussions with MDOT on what this development, how that would impact M59 and what would need to happen there. Again, those conversations typically happen at the point of a development, but generally speaking, this project is accessible to an existing street network. And at the time of development, those are the hurdles would have to get over, but for the purposes of this particular requirement, staff feels that it at least has access to a street network. What improvements would have to be made, I don't know. Maybe this would involve fixing a portion of Cundy Road as part of this development, but those are all questions and answers that would be dealt with at the time of the development proposal.
And does your drive, your Hartland Glen Drive, does that go on to Cundy before Cundy goes to 59?
Cundy ends at Hartland Glen Drive.
So Hartland Glen Drive is the street that comes out on 59, or does Cundy?
Right.
So it's you that comes out on 59. Okay. Okay. Any questions or comments on that? All righty. Section 743G, apparent demand for uses permitted in the HDR district. Troy, I think we kind of touched on this a little bit, but
yeah, this one we rely heavily on the applicant to provide us some sort of document or some. It may be part of his presentation where he would kind of identify to the Planning Commission that there is a demand for this. So on this one, I primarily rely on what the applicant provides, and the write-up that the applicant provided did not really address this particular one. So I would just defer back. If the Planning Commission wants, they can certainly ask for that information from the Planning Commission or from the applicant.
what makes you, I understand 602 RUs are driving the request for the rezoning, but what makes you think people want to buy those houses?
We did a study on Hartland, and there's only 2 residential projects.
Okay.
From what we see, the average price per home in Hartland Township, the whole company is over $240,000. With us developing this land, we can certainly compete with any other development there is in here and provide a golf course community. People love to live on a golf course, okay, and be close to a golf course. So we feel confident that we will be successful. And we've done a residential project in Hartland. It was very successful at the time. When you look at the economy, especially the automotive.
Questions? Anybody? Section 743H, ability to comply with the zoning regulations. Troy?
Yeah, this one, when you apply it to here, it's a little difficult to understand. I think this criteria maybe makes more sense in a circumstance where if somebody wanted to rezone some property to commercial, for example, and once you applied all the commercial setbacks on it, there was no physical way to build something on the property. You might, under this criteria, say, well, it makes no sense to rezone that to commercial. You couldn't physically build anything on that property with that proposed zoning category. In this case, the 73 acres, HDR, staff sees no reason why we couldn't do a development and construct any of the permitted uses in full compliance with the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Comments? Okay, 743I, appropriateness of the requested zoning district. Right.
Well, this is again for the Planning Commission to examine how appropriate they feel the HDR category is. I'm looking at a concept plan here. Maybe it's better to look at the zoning map for this. And certainly examine what's around here. You've got essentially subdivisions to the west. This is a mixed-use project going on over here. There's some residential to the north. And then it's a golf course there. How appropriate do you feel an HDR zoning category in this configuration right here is in this area, given what's currently there and what the current zoning is?
Okay. Packet page 18, section 743J, amendment of permitted or special uses versus rezoning.
Again, when you apply this particular rezoning criteria to this current request, it's difficult to maybe even understand what this means. With the 73-acre site, we're not really, staff doesn't see any concerns with any of the permitted uses or special use permits, uses that would be allowed in the HDR category. So with this current request, it appears that this would be consistent with that criteria.
Okay. 743K, exclusionary and spot zoning issues.
So those are two terms that are kind of used generally in planning, spot zoning and exclusionary zoning. And so what we did is tried to give some specific definitions to what those are. So we utilize some outside sources outside of our own zoning ordinance. We use the MSU has a land use extension program, and they have some resources that kind of define what some of those terms are. And those are certainly available for you to read in detail. I won't bore you with all that. Spot zoning would be something like in the middle of a residential subdivision, you rezone one lot to commercial that is completely isolated by itself and is not consistent with any of the surroundings that it's in. Exclusionary zoning is almost the opposite of that, where you're totally excluding certain uses within the boundaries of your township. And again, the staff does not see any concerns with this applicant meeting this criteria here.
Okay. I'm on packet page 19, section 743L, submittal of a similar request within 1 year. You haven't done that, so that one is okay. Section 743M, other factors. My mind has been wandering on this, how to deal with 380 acres and a 73-acre request.
Well, so, my thoughts on that are it is always in the best interest, in my opinion, to answer the question you've been asked. The question you've been asked is, would you rezone this 73 acres from CA to HDR? So make sure whatever you do, you're just answering that question. that helps. Maybe I'm making it more complicated.
Well, I understand that,
Okay.
but you can't help but keep the other question in the back of your mind.
Doesn't it?
Anybody else have questions or?
At this point? Yeah, I do have a couple. So, for this 73 acres that you're requesting to rezone, is it your intention to do this in just a couple of phases or multi-phases? Your first comment was that you're going to do phase one, which consists of 47 units.
At a minimum 2 phases.
At a minimum of 2. If everything were going,
If things go smooth with the first 48 lots, we may be bold enough to do 60 or 70, and then another 60 or 70, whatever is left.
okay.
And that would be coming back for all of that subdivision, site plan review, all of the program that we would have to do to review the site plan.
Yes.
Would you be open to allowing HDR zoning on 73 acres that he owns on the northern end of his 383 acres? That's what we're being asked.
Correct.
Are there any other questions? You do not have to decide tonight. Just if you recall, when we do a public hearing and these types of things, you have the opportunity to not answer that question tonight. The only thing that we do require, or we do state, is if we aren't going to answer it, when are we coming back to this topic? So everybody leaving here tonight knows what that date is. You need to think about this. If you need more information or you're just flat out not prepared, that would be an option. If not, you are also allowed to make a decision if you want.
I know that at the Township Board, typically on a public hearing, we do not make a decision on that night. Unless it's an absolute emergency, it's put over to the next board meeting or at a meeting that's noticed subsequent to that date. The idea really is to take into consideration a lot of the comments here and comments from the applicant, and then consider, further, information that we've received that we've talked about tonight. Get some answers to those questions, and then come back. That may be the way to go. And I would suggest we not make a decision tonight. In particular, I think Keith isn't here as well, and it would be helpful to have Keith's perspective as well.
I'm of the same opinion. I mean, I could render a decision tonight, but I would prefer to postpone. During this discussion, new information came to light for me, which I would like to do some additional research on to understand. And as I say, I think it would be in the best interest of all parties to postpone a decision, from my personal perspective.
Tom, what do you think?
So I agree. I agree that it's hard to differentiate just between the 73-acre parcel and the balance of the land. I think the problem a lot of us are having, and I think that just in general, I'm not ready to make that decision tonight.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, I agree.
Sue?
I agree.
So when would you like to bring this topic back to a public meeting? We have a meeting in 2 weeks?
Yep. Here is your schedule. February 23rd, which would be in 2 weeks, we can get this case back on for discussion at that meeting. You have a meeting March 9th and the 23rd, so forth.
What are you guys comfortable with?
Yeah, I think the 23rd.
I do too.
Okay.
2 weeks would be fine for me.
So for everyone here, we're going to bring this back. There's no decision tonight, and we're going to bring this back on February 23rd. It'll be on our agenda. It won't be a public hearing at that time. It'll be a regular meeting. So at that meeting, it will have our normal call to the public at the beginning. We also have one here still tonight. But we will have a call to the public at the beginning of the meeting. It will be an agenda item. I don't know if there will be other items on the agenda, but we won't open it up during the middle of the agenda item and do the public comment like we did this evening, because this was a public hearing. So I guess we'll see you on February 23rd. Okay. Thank you very much, Sam. Okay, we have item 9, call to the public. Is there anything anyone would like to say this evening? Sure, absolutely. Give us your name again, just so
Gloria
we make
Poi. I wanted to say it feels like there's certain amount of financial pressure just because they bought all those 600-some sewer tap. I don't think the resident in the area should be punished for their bad investment. Also, I think the whole acreage should be taken into consideration because of the watershed, because of the wetland, and it flows through the whole property. If you divide it into just the 70-some acres, phase 1 development, you're missing the whole thing. With their sewer tap, they're going to be pressured to continue on with the development. And where the 70-some acre is, my property, I own large portion of the wetland between Cundy Road and the golf course. And my wetland flow into Sherry's Lake across the street. So all this water is all connected, even from their back property, all those designated wetland. So you're pretty much cutting off where the head of the flow is. I mean, the whole thing is connected. So I really hope that you take the whole parcel into consideration rather than just the 70-some acres that, halfway through this wetland system.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Doug Sartson, I just want to thank you again for the time to let us speak. And one other comment, we were speaking about the access to public roads on there, and I know they were mentioning the main entrance, I think, would be at Hartland Glen Road, but it appeared that there's also a west entrance that's directly on Cundy Road. And when you look at that plan, most of those houses, or all of those houses, are west of Hartland Glen Road. So anybody coming off of 23 is probably going to take Bullard down to Cundy and into that first entrance. Otherwise, they're driving past their house and through the neighborhood with probably lower speed limit streets to get to their house. So just a comment for consideration. Thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you. Anyone else?
I do have a thought. He had mentioned that he's in financial straits to get this rezoning. So the question comes to me, if he doesn't get it, then what happens to this land? Is it going to be abandoned, and then we face this again with someone else? So that's a concern that I have as well. Not saying that, give it to him, and the 602 was their choice, but I am concerned with what happens if something isn't done, because I've looked at their taxes, and they can't sell enough golf to make this tax payment. It's just not feasible.
Well,
so that's a question I have.
Two things can happen. One is, just as you indicated, they could walk away from it and someone else pick up the property, and they'd be stuck with the same issues. That's one of the possibilities. The other possibility is he could also take us to court. He loses rezoning. The zoning...
Well, he's already done that, hasn't he?
Not on the zoning.
Not on the zoning?
Yep. And the zoning creates rights in the property. And, and those who are familiar with how that works is that someone will sue, there could invite a lawsuit for denial of a zoning change. When you get a denial of a zoning change, a judge gets to make the decision.
Right.
And the judge is going to look at it a lot differently than perhaps 7 people here and then the board. We there have been lawsuits in this township, and here are lawsuits that have resulted in particular zoning changes. Mill Point was one of them. The apartments, I believe, next door to Mill Point.
Across from the high school?
Across from the high school was. And I believe there may have been others. Those are the two that I'm most familiar with.
Okay.
So when we take these things very seriously. We take the comments from the public very seriously. We also have to weigh that against the rights of the property owner. I mean, there isn't more fundamental right in our country is the right to own property and not have the government interfere with it. And the zoning laws is an interference with property rights. So you have to fall within the parameters of the law as it relates to how you grant those rights.
Okay, that's just something that concerns me as to what if it doesn't go through, then what's going to happen with this land if they
You should
were to let
be
it go?
concerned. We should all be concerned
I'm
for
concerned.
whatever that property is today and or tomorrow.
Yeah, and I'm
That's
also
why
concerned about the
we're here.
30 acres that sits right beside me.
I believe I would be correct to tell you that if they did walk away from the property, those 600 and some odd RUs will sit there right with it for the next guy.
Yeah, I've seen the
They're
tax
there.
on that property that he says he lost, and
They're there.
but they did get a shock if somebody went to buy that.
So we try and work within everything that we possibly can to make things work.
Okay.
And we are, you can tell by probably our looks on our face and we're in deep thought.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, good evening. We haven't talked with you yet tonight.
I got here late.
Okay.
Randall Samuels on Maxfield Road.
Okay.
And a couple of things. One, is it really the township's responsibility to worry about somebody's success of somebody's investment? But more to the point was, I was wondering something, I didn't hear this, and I was just brought to my attention. Is there plan to be a redefinition of the HDR designation?
But there is different HDR on the land use versus HDR that's in the zoning.
Okay, because it was mentioned to me that it might be going up to like something like or down to like 4,000 acre lot or 4,000. That wouldn't happen because that.
No, it's 88,000.
That would be my concern. You showed you this one plan right now, but then the definition changes and then it goes to twice the density of what it is. And I just wanted to make
No, it would go to the HDR of the zoning map, of the zoning district, and that was an 8,000 square foot minimum, or 8,400 minimum.
Okay, so it couldn't decrease.
No.
So just to clarify, this is the zoning ordinance, this is the HDR category, and on the second page of this is the minimum lot size requirement right there. It says 8,400 square feet.
So you could get nothing less.
Okay, yeah, there's no plan to redefine that and make it to
no.
And in answer to your first question you asked, what is it the township's concern? The township should be concerned because one of the elements in a zoning decision has to do with a person's reasonable investment back expectations of their property. So if I buy a piece of industrial property, I expect to be able to put an industrial facility on that, or if I'm near a facility. So I'm explaining, in part what an answer to your question. I don't care what he does, but at the end of the day, there's certain rights that property owner has.
But he also bought a golf course. He didn't buy a residential neighborhood.
I don't understand what the question is.
Well, you just said if you bought an industrial property, you could expect to get something back. If you buy
But his zoning is a residential district.
Yeah,
it happens to have a golf course on it, but it's a residential district, so he can build houses.
Okay, I thought it wasn't. I thought it was CA.
It's CA. That's a residential.
No, that's not. I thought it was like conservation agriculture.
That's the name of it, but you may live on a CA piece of property also. So there are uses that come with it. It's. I spent years studying it. There's a lot of complexity.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand.
I totally agree. I understand the questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for coming in. All right, anyone else?
Sorry, just wanted to reiterate my concern about the lake.
Just give us your name again.
Sherry
I think
Dalton.
Okay, Sherry, thank you.
My concern about the lake and just the runoff from a development in there, along with the roads and everything outside of the development and how it will impact. So impact studies, I think, are warranted for not just like the wetlands of the development, but the surrounding area, as well as the roads.
Okay, thank you. Another new face. All right, you have to sign the sheet before you
I
leave.
have to go low here. My name is Gail Off, and I also live on Maxfield Road. I understand all your concerns about rezoning, but I also want to express my support for more studies to be done about the watershed, about all the lakes and everything like that. I just think it's really, I understand the fear of property rights and all that, but if you're going to grant these rights, then also grant the people that are living around there the ability to know exactly what's going to happen and what the impact could be. It's really important, and we're all very, very concerned about it. I also want to ask, is this the appropriate forum not to talk about the farmers market, or would that be another meeting?
Call to the public.
Okay.
You are welcome.
I'm a little dismayed as to what happened to the Hartland Farmers Market. It used to be on M59. In talking to some of the farmers, I understand there was a concern by the school that they wanted the parking, which there's a ton of, the old high school has a ton of parking. That aside, the farmers market had such an incredible visibility by being on M59. I really feel the farmers market is a really important thing in our community. It supports our local farmers and other people to make a living and to use the surrounding lands to grow things that are good for us and leave us healthy. And I really feel that the farmers market this year was in a place where nobody, I mean, the farm, when you went there, the people complained. Nobody could find them. I mean, they were across from the ball field. And unless there was a ball game, no, there's not a whole lot of traffic. And I just wish that this would have a little more attention and to figure out a place that has more visibility. Maybe back on 59, for example, maybe the Target parking lot, which is so huge, and literally I'm the only person ever at Target. You can find me at Target most of the time. There's nobody in that parking lot. Perhaps it could go in there. Maybe you could arrange some deal with it. I'd really love to see it be a more vibrant part of our community. I know there's vendors out there that would really like to come, but this year a lot of them dropped out because there just wasn't enough traffic. So I'd like that to be maybe on the agenda at a future thing. I'd love to be a part of helping find a place for it. So
You might want to talk to the township board.
Okay.
And present those issues. A couple of things as a township board liaison, we did look at other alternatives because the parking lot is from the old high school. They were having issues with sufficient parking on the weekends. That was one of the concerns they had, and competing events going on inside and outside of the. So you'll have to. Those are really those issues. We did look at other alternatives, and we're still looking at other alternatives for that. Actually, maybe trying to find a permanent place for the farmers market with some attributes that they haven't had.
That would be great.
So we are looking at that. And
okay, good. I just hope it's going to be in a sort of a high-traffic area because a lot of times it's impulse.
Right, and the other problem with the Target parking lot is the fact that it's private property.
Okay.
Yeah, that's owned by Target or the developer.
But they never, would they ever, but isn't there an opportunity for them to use
It's complex. It's complex.
It's complex.
It's everything.
Okay,
and also, let's just leave it at that.
Okay.
It's so complex. I wish it wasn't.
I just know I'm speaking on behalf of some of the people, the vendors, that were very unhappy this year, and I'm glad you're working on it, but I just wanted to support that.
It continues to be a concern of, I think, our whole township board is very well aware of it and does want the farmers market to succeed.
Good to hear. Thank you.
If I can, so I'm glad you came forward to talk on that topic because we have a side group, an ordinance review committee that's looking at that specifically, and we're trying to act on it as quick as possible. Because we understand the value of the farmers market. We know the history you just made mention of, and so we're looking at anything along M59, as Joe mentioned, because that's where as your point, your highest profile. So.
And I do want to add that the Highland Farmers Market may not happen this year. The school wanted more money from the people, and they don't think they're going to have it this year, which makes our farmers market even more important this year if the Highland market doesn't happen. Okay, so I'd love to help out any way I can. Thank you. I'm in advertising, so I'd love to help.
You weren't here in the beginning, I don't think. Could you print your name on that sheet?
No, but I will.
Okay, thank you. We want to get your name correct in our minutes.
Right.
Okay.
And also, Kathy Horning, our township treasurer.
Oh, yeah, I know Kathy.
Yeah, I would talk to her.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else this evening? Hello.
Hi, my name's Sarah Sarson. You guys have heard from my husband a couple times. I live on Cundy Road. I think the word that scared us the most when we got the letter was high density. I guess that's 2 words, but I think we're all kind of struggling with the high density portion of it. We understand that there were investments made and some confusing new terms that I learned about sewers and septics, and I think that the thing that we're most concerned about is the high-density portion of it. We understand that progress happens and things change, but the high-density part of it is what we're really concerned about, and we appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you. Yep, if you wouldn't mind. I think we do have, just while she's signing that, we do have 2 residential categories that are denser than high density, do we not? So
yeah, we do have.
So just so I know the words, those words were on all these labels were pasted before I got here because they are very confusing. I've said that already tonight.
And I appreciate that, but it seems like, have there been any, I'm not in finance, but is there a way for him to recoup this investment by using medium density or something that's a little easier for folks that border this property to handle? Could that be an option?
He says not 601.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else this evening? Well, we do want to thank you all for coming. We are going to adjourn our meeting in a moment, but we do welcome the public. I've said this over and over. We like having meetings where people come. It's very warming to feel that people care enough to show up at a meeting and take time in their evening and come and listen. And we do listen to what you say. And we are always weighing the information on both sides and understand we represent everybody, whether you, the property owner, or the property owner of the Hartland Glen Golf Course. So we sit between all of it and we try and make the best decisions we can. But look forward to seeing you back here on February 23rd. And I guess with that, we're going to give Troy a planner's report. Anything tonight?
I do just have one comment. And the timing of it is, I guess, unusual, but we had an ordinance review committee meeting last Thursday about farmers market, and we asked Township Board member Kathy Horning, who's very involved in the farmers market, to come in and speak to our 3 ordinance review committee members to give some background, some history on the issues that the farmers market is facing, and just to kind of let you know why they can't just locate in the Target parking lot or Kroger's parking lot. The farmers market is permitted in the township under the special event ordinance, and the special event ordinance essentially outlines in there that the farmers market is only permitted to occur on public or quasi-public property. So therefore, they can only occur on a school property, or quasi-public could be deemed a church property or township property or some other form of public property. And the availability of public property or quasi-public property on M59 where they feel they need visibility, and if they don't have visibility, they feel that the farmers market will cease to exist. There just isn't any available public or quasi-public properties. Well, in order to accommodate that, that's going to take action by the Planning Commission and the Township Board. So Trustee Kathy Horning raised that at the last Township Board meeting, and so the goal is that the Township Board may be directing the Planning Commission to kind of look at that issue, and then hopefully we can move on that soon. So just to give you a little bit of background on that. And that's really all I have in Planner's report.
Wow.
I was going to go on for a couple more hours, but I think that's it.
Going to make it different tonight. 11, committee reports. Comments, anyone? I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn. Can I have one, please?
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn from Commissioner Kalani, a second from Commissioner Newsom. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. None. So we are done this evening. Thanks again for